she left me at the altar, in front of 300 people. That is the sentence I rehearsed in my head for the next 11 months, because it was the only sentence that did not make me feel small. The longer version included the bridesmaid who would not look at me. It included my mother stepping forward in her good dress and putting her hand on my arm like I was already a corpse. It included the moment I understood that Vivian was not late, that Vivian had not been in an accident, that Vivian had simply made another choice. I waited 18 minutes at the front of that ballroom. I am told this is statistically an unusual length of time. Most men would have known after 8. I believed in her until 12. I believed in her family until 15. I believed she might come through the door in tears with some terrible explanation until 18. At 18, I looked at my brother Nathan, and Nathan looked at the floor. She had sent a text to the maid of honor, not to me. The maid of honor read it, walked out the side door, came back 20 seconds later because she remembered her job, and said the words out loud in the foyer where the photographer was standing. The photographer told the catering manager. The catering manager told the band leader. The band leader, before I had even been told, stopped pretending to tune his guitar. 300 people learned before I did. 300 people had the chance to arrange their faces before they turned to look at me. My name is Adrienne Cole. I was 31. I ran a small architecture practice I had built from 1 client to 19 in 6 years. I had a leased apartment in a building Vivian picked. I had a tuxedo with a charcoal vest the tailor had fitted 3 times because Vivian wanted it to sit a specific way. I had been engaged for 14 months to a woman named Vivian Hale, and I had loved her with the kind of plain, organized devotion that I now understand made me look, to certain people, like furniture. I stood at the altar another full minute after I knew. Then my mother took my arm, and Nathan took the other, and they walked me out the way you walk a man out of a courtroom. People parted. One of Vivian's aunts, a woman I had met twice, said audibly behind her hand, "Oh, the poor thing." She did not mean me. She meant Vivian. She meant whatever Vivian had been spared. That is the wound. Not that she left. That the room reorganized itself around her absence as if she were the injured party. That the version of me standing at the altar was understood instantly by 300 witnesses as a man it had been reasonable to abandon. I went home to the apartment Vivian had picked, and at 3 a.m. my phone buzzed. "I'm sorry," she wrote. "I just couldn't pretend anymore. You're a good man. You deserve someone who's actually excited." That was the message. 18 words. I read it twice. I set the phone face down on the kitchen counter. I made a cup of tea because I could not think of anything else to do with my hands. I sat on the couch in the tuxedo trousers and looked at the wall. The maid of honor was a woman named Eleanor Pace. Eleanor had been Vivian's best friend since college. Eleanor had helped pick the venue. Eleanor had toasted us at the engagement dinner and said, my voice will crack here, "You two are the proof." Eleanor had also, I would learn later, been the one who told Vivian 3 weeks before the wedding that I was not enough, that I would never be enough, that Vivian was settling, that the only reason Vivian was going through with it was inertia and the deposit on the band. Eleanor was thorough. Eleanor was patient. Eleanor had, I would learn later, been planning this for almost a year. But that was later. That night, I drank the tea, and I went to bed in the tuxedo trousers because I did not want to take them off in front of the mirror. And I lay in the dark and made a decision I did not yet understand the size of. I would disappear. Not literally. I would not fake my death. I would not move to a cabin. I would do something quieter, and as it turned out, much more useful. I would stop being the version of Adrian Cole that 300 people had pitied. I would let that man die in the public record. I would build, in private, behind a different name, the version of myself I had been too distracted to build while I was busy trying to be the man Vivian wanted. I gave notice on the apartment in the morning. I told my mother I needed time. I told Nathan, who is a corporate lawyer and therefore difficult to lie to, the actual plan. Nathan listened without expression and then said, "Fine, but I keep the paperwork. I'll set up the entity. You don't sign anything under your own name." That is how it began. I had been working, for 2 years before the wedding, on a residential design system. Modular, prefabricated, the kind of project Vivian had once called my little hobby because it did not look like the boutique commissions her father's friends were paying me for. I had drawings, I had supplier contacts, I had a structural engineer in Portland who had been waiting for me to finish the math. I finished the math in 4 months. I lived in a studio above a bakery and I worked until my hands cramped, and then I worked another hour. Nathan registered the company under a holding name. We called the brand Northline. I was a silent partner. The face of the company, on paper, was a former colleague named Marcus Webb, who needed the work and could be trusted to read from a script. By month 7, Northline had a pilot contract with a developer in Denver. By month 9, we had 3. By month 11, a national magazine ran a profile that called Northline the most interesting thing happening in mid-market residential construction in a decade. The photograph in the profile was of Marcus, standing in front of a finished unit, looking modestly into the middle distance. I was in Portland that week, on the phone with the engineer, eating a sandwich. I had not spoken to Vivian since the text. I had not spoken to Eleanor at all. I had heard, through Nathan, that Vivian and Eleanor were now living together in a way that everyone in the old circle was pretending not to notice. I had heard that Vivian had told people I had been controlling, that I had been cold, that the engagement had been a slow suffocation she had escaped narrowly with Eleanor's help. I did not respond to any of it. I built the second product line. I hired 4 people. I bought a small house in a town nobody in the old circle had heard of, under the holding company's name, and I learned to cook 3 meals properly, and I stopped wearing a watch, and one morning, in the 11th month, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, and I did not recognize the man Vivian had walked out on. That man was gone. I had used him for parts. And then I died. It was not my idea. A blog that covered the construction industry ran a short item about Northline's founder, identifying him by the holding company name, and a regional paper picked it up and printed a clarifying sentence that the founder had been Adrian Cole, a Denver-based architect who, sources said, had died in a private capacity the previous year and whose work was being carried forward by his partners. I am not sure where the rumor began. Possibly Eleanor, who had been telling people in our old circle for months that I had fallen apart, that I had vanished, that I was probably not well. Possibly a real confusion at the regional paper. Possibly Nathan, who has a sense of humor he does not advertise. Either way, by Tuesday morning the story had moved from the construction blog to a local news site to a national aggregator. By Tuesday afternoon, my name was trending. Adrian Cole, the quietly brilliant architect behind Northline's transformation of American mid-market housing, has died, the headlines read. He was 32. He is survived by his brother. His firm declined to comment. I read the headlines on my phone, in the kitchen of the small house, drinking coffee from a mug I had bought at a hardware store. I felt nothing for about a minute. Then I felt something I did not have a word for at first, and then I had the word. Useful. The word was useful. I called Nathan. He answered on the second ring and said, before I spoke, "I know." "Do we correct it?" I said. There was a pause. Nathan is a careful man. He said, "Do you want to?" I thought about it. I drank some coffee. I thought about Vivian and Eleanor and the 300 faces in the ballroom. I thought about the aunt who had said, "Oh, the poor thing." "Not yet," I said. Nathan said, "Fine. I'll have the firm decline to comment for one more news cycle. After that, we have to say something, or we get into fraud territory." "One cycle," I said. "That's all I need." I hung up. I went to my desk. I opened the laptop, and I did the thing I had not allowed myself to do for 11 months. I looked at Vivian's social media. Vivian had posted nothing for 2 days. Eleanor had posted nothing for 2 days. The mutual friends had posted condolences, carefully, in the language people use when they are not sure whether their grief is allowed. One of Vivian's bridesmaids had written, "I didn't know him well, but my heart goes out to anyone who did." Vivian's mother had liked the post. Vivian had not. At 3 that afternoon, Vivian posted a photograph. It was a photograph of the two of us, taken about 2 years before the wedding, on a hike. I was laughing at something off camera. She was looking at me. The caption was a single line. "I never meant for it to end this way." The post received 4,000 comments in 6 hours. The comments were the part I had not predicted. People I had never met were writing about me. People who had been at the wedding were writing about her. Someone had screenshotted the 18-word text. Someone had screenshotted Eleanor's toast at the engagement dinner. Someone had remembered in detail what the maid of honor had said in the foyer. Someone had remembered Vivian's aunt. Someone had remembered the way the band had stopped. The internet, when it decides to remember something, remembers it with terrible precision. By the next morning, Vivian had deleted the post. By the next afternoon, Eleanor had locked her account. By the evening, a journalist who covered design and architecture had published a long piece about Northline that named me, by my real name, as the founder, and noted in the second paragraph that the recent rumors of my death appeared to be unfounded and that Northline's representatives had now confirmed I was alive. The journalist had reached Nathan. Nathan had read from the script we had agreed on. "Adrian is well. He has chosen to keep his work and his private life separate. He has no comment on personal matters." The headline of that piece, which ran in a magazine that everyone in my old circle read, was "The Architect Who Disappeared on Purpose." It went up at 6 in the evening. By 8, my phone had 19 voicemails. By 10, it had 41. I did not listen to any of them. I made dinner. I read for an hour. I went to bed. The next morning, there was a message from Vivian, not a call, a message. It was 4 paragraphs long. I read the first paragraph, and then I closed the phone and went for a walk. I came back an hour later and read the whole thing. She wrote that she had not known, that she had believed I had fallen apart, that Eleanor had told her repeatedly that I was barely functioning, that she had felt guilty for a long time, and that the guilt was the reason she had stopped looking at the news about me, the reason she had not searched my name, the reason she had not understood that the Northline she had been reading about in the design magazines was mine. She wrote that she had been wrong about me, that she had been wrong about herself, that if I would meet her just once, just for an hour, she could explain. I read the message twice. Then I called Nathan. "She wants a meeting," I said. Of course she does, Nathan said. Should I? I said. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, This is not a legal question. I can't answer this one for you. I thought about it for a day. I thought about the version of Adrian Cole who had stood at the altar for 18 minutes. I thought about what that man would have wanted me to do. He would have wanted to go. He would have wanted to hear her out. He would have wanted, more than anything, for her to understand the size of what she had done. But that man was gone. I had used him for parts. I wrote back one sentence. No. She responded within 10 minutes. Please. I did not respond. She wrote again the next day, a longer message. She said that Eleanor had moved out, that Eleanor had been lying to her about a number of things for a number of years, that Eleanor had been the one to first suggest, 6 months before the wedding, that Vivian might be making a mistake, that Eleanor had introduced doubts and then watered them, that Eleanor had been the one to draft the 18-word text, that Vivian had sent it, but Eleanor had written it. I read this message standing in my kitchen. I felt something cold move through my chest and then settle. I did not write back. I called the journalist. The journalist's name was Sophia Park. She had written the piece that revealed I was alive. She had been respectful and accurate, and she had not asked, in our first conversation, about Vivian or the wedding. I called her and I said, I have something to add to the record. Not for tomorrow, for whenever you do the longer piece. And I told her, in detail, what Eleanor had done. I sent her the timeline. I sent her a screenshot of Vivian's second message with Vivian's name and identifying details blacked out, but with the relevant sentence intact. Eleanor wrote it. Eleanor wrote the text. Sophia said, Are you sure? I said, I have been sure for 48 hours. She published the piece 3 weeks later. It ran in the same magazine. It was called The Maid of Honor, and it was 4,000 words long, and it named Eleanor Pace by name, and it traced, with the kind of documentary precision Eleanor herself had once admired in other people, the architecture of what Eleanor had built, the friendships she had cultivated, the doubts she had planted, the text she had drafted, the version of the story she had spent 11 months feeding to a circle of people who had once been mine. The piece did not name Vivian. It did not need to. The circle knew. Eleanor lost her job within a week. The PR firm she worked for issued a statement about reviewing internal conduct and then quietly let her go. 2 of her closest friends, women who had been bridesmaids at my non-wedding, stopped returning her calls. Her lease, which had been in Vivian's name, ended and was not renewed. Eleanor moved out of the city. I do not know where she went. I have not looked. Vivian wrote to me once more after the piece ran. The message was shorter. She said only that she understood now, that she would not write again, that she hoped I was well, that she was sorry, in a way that she finally believed I would not accept, and that was correct. I did not respond. I have not heard from her since. I want to tell you about the morning I understood the shape of what had happened, because that is the morning I think of as the real ending. It was a Saturday. I was in the garden of the small house. I had planted tomatoes, badly, and I was learning. A car pulled up at the end of the drive and a woman got out. I did not recognize her at first. She was older than I remembered, and she was walking carefully, and she was carrying a small wrapped package. It was my mother. My mother had not been to the house. I had not invited her. Nathan had brought her the address 2 weeks earlier and asked if she could come, and she had said yes immediately, And then she had waited 2 weeks because she did not want to ambush me. She walked up the drive. She looked at the tomatoes. She said, "Those are planted too close." I said, "I know." She said, "Can I sit down?" I made her tea. We sat on the back step. She did not say anything for a long time, and then she said, "I should not have walked you out of that room." I did not understand. I said, "What?" She said, "At the wedding, when you understood, I should not have taken your arm and walked you out like you were broken. I should have stood next to you and let you decide when to leave. I made you small in front of those people. I have thought about it every day for almost a year." I looked at her. She was older than I remembered. She was crying, quietly, the way she had cried at my father's funeral, which was the only other time I had seen her cry. I said, "I forgive you." She said, "You don't have to." I said, "I know." We drank the tea. She stayed for the afternoon. She helped me move 2 of the tomato plants. Before she left, she said, "The Sophia Park piece. I read it 3 times." I said, "I know." She said, "I am proud of who you are." I want to say that out loud in case I have not said it enough. She got in her car and drove away. I sat on the back step for a long time after that, and I thought about the 300 faces in the ballroom, and I thought about Vivian's aunt, and I thought about Eleanor in whatever city she had moved to, and I thought about Vivian, who had finally understood what she had done 11 months too late. And I felt, for the first time, the thing I had been waiting to feel. It was not satisfaction. It was not even peace exactly. It was a kind of quietness. The quietness of a room after the last guest has left and the door has closed and you realize the apartment is yours again. The quietness of understanding that the version of you that those people had pitied was not a version you needed to mourn. You had not lost him. You had outgrown him. I went back inside. I made dinner. The next morning, I went back to work. Northline is in 9 markets now. We are hiring 22 people next quarter. I am no longer a silent partner. My name is on the company. The boutique commissions I used to take, the ones Vivian's father's friends paid for, I no longer accept. They write sometimes. I do not respond. Sophia Park and I are friends now. We had dinner last week. She is sharp and funny, and she does not ask me about Vivian. I do not know what we will become. I am in no hurry. My mother comes to the house every other Sunday. She is teaching me to cook the things my father used to make. The tomatoes did well in the end. I gave a basket to the woman who runs the bakery downstairs from my old studio, and she remembered me, and she said, "You look different." I said, "I am." I do not think about Vivian often. When I do, I think of her the way you think of a city you once lived in and will never visit again. She was the place where I learned what I did not want to be. I do not wish her ill. I do not wish her anything. She is a closed door, and the door has a lock I cannot find from this side, and I have not looked for it. The last thing I want to say is this. When she left me at the altar, in front of 300 people, I believed for a long time that she had taken something from me, that she had walked out of that ballroom with a piece of who I was supposed to be. I was wrong about that. She did not take anything. She returned something. She returned the years I would have spent making myself smaller to fit beside her. She returned the version of me who would never have built Northline, never have moved to this town, never have learned to plant a tomato, never have sat on the back step with my mother and forgiven her in 5 words. She thought she was leaving a man at an altar. She was, without knowing it, setting one free. And when the world told her, 11 months later, that the man she had abandoned had died, she had to sit with the size of what she had thrown away, in public, in front of the same circle that had once watched her walk out. That was not my doing. I did not write that ending. The world wrote it, and I let the world write it. And I think, on balance, the world got it right. I am still here. I am better than I was. The tomatoes, finally, are good.